Major support for these broadcasts is provided by Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by AVR Realty Company, LLC, All Nation Renovation, Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, Cassidy Turley, C.B. Richard Ellis, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Eastern Consolidated, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Genova Burns and Gian Tomasi, Goldman Properties, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Corming Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Newmark Knight Frank, RAL Development Services, The Spandrel Group, LLC, Site Comply, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Triangle Equities, The Wickoff Group, Urban American.
There are chefs, there are kids from Brooklyn who want to be actors, want to be in television, and then subsequently they become chefs. They write books. Today I got the chef from Brooklyn, the kid who worked at Monty's Venetian Room, a man who I really enjoy being with, who says, why is he on my show? But I'm telling the life story of Michael Lomonoca today. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here.
So, you were telling me, it's interesting, your dad was a barber, your mother was a homemaker, and in a way you felt like you were an orphan because one of your brothers was 15 years older than you and one was 11 years old. So, you like lived alone when you were growing up, right?
Well, that's certainly true. But I didn't feel like an orphan.
No.
No Italian family lets any. But certainly, the only child aspect, or that sort of, that isolation. But you know what that gave me? That gave me a love for movies.
I know you went. But that's when you could go to the movies and see 2 movies in the afternoon.
And shorts
and
too.
Shorts,
and see shorts and
right.
newsreels.
And I'm older than you, and you still remember that.
I used to go to the Walker Theater, which was on 18th Avenue. Now it's a retail store. But I'll tell you, my mother loved music, and there was always music playing in the house. There was always music on. The radio was always on. My mother was, she was partially sighted. She was legally blind. So we always had music on. I developed a great love for American music.
Right, and you took up the guitar. How old were you when you took up the guitar?
When I was 14 years
Wasn't
old.
the mandolin?
I played the violin.
Okay.
You know what? That gave me, music has been a part of my life since I was, really since I was 5 years old. And the first song I learned to sing was Havan Nagila.
But it was good later.
Listening to records and my neighbors.
It was perfect later on because, when you did the stage work at the Yiddish Theater, but we'll get to that in a second.
And I even played Tevye once in college.
So here's what happens. The kid grows up in Brooklyn and no idea that he's going to be a chef. I mean, he wanted to be an actor, right? That's what you wanted to become.
Exactly. And you know what? The idea of entertaining people really revolves, it's not just about wanting them to love you, but also about giving somebody something, a break from their lives, some enjoyment, pleasure. And it's just carried over into, that's really what the restaurant business is all about.
As opposed to going to parochial schools, you went to public school.
Yep.
And then the interesting thing is your older brother, who is the psychiatrist, went to scholarship at Brandeis. It was interesting to have a nice Roman Catholic kid, Sicilian, to go to Brandeis.
That's true. He was one of the first in 1958.
So now you graduate from New Utrecht and you decide to go to Brooklyn College. for arts, right? Because they had a great, and they still continue to have a great
A fantastic arts department.
arts
The theater department there, and to this day is just full of really great professors. The teaching staff are all right out of the industry. They're all working. Many are
it's
working
interesting.
professionals.
All these bios on you, they talk about New York City Tech. They don't talk about Brooklyn College. What happened? You try to hide that 3.5 years of your life?
Well, it really, honestly, I became a chef because I love food. So my adult life.
Okay, so 3.5 years, and you're doing the stage.
But I really worked at being an actor until I was 28 years old.
No, but we have to talk about this before you get into telling how you became a chef. That's later on in life. There's those formative years. So 3.5 years, and you didn't finish Brooklyn College because Lomonaco goes on the road to become Jesus Christ Superstar? What were you playing? What was the role that you were playing?
I played Caiaphas, the high priest. Don't you hear the bass voice?
Oh.
I sang Caiaphas for months. A bus in those days. I don't even know how they do it today, but in those days it was a bus and truck tour. You literally got on a bus. Everything else went in the truck. And we went from town to town.
But it was a great experience, which I'll get to in a second. But from Caiaphas, how do you get? What role did you play in Hair? I mean.
Well, this is the rock musical era we're talking about. The mid '70s, sort of the late '70s. The rock musicals that were on the road were Superstar and Godspell, which is coming back to Broadway, by the way, and I think it's going to do really great. And Hair. So they sort of went hand in hand, because if I gave you a photo of what I looked like in those days, I had quite a full beard and quite a head of hair. It was a perfect thing, actually. It was a great training.
But you said to me when we got together, the interesting situation is when you were on the road for 14 months, it was a very good experience for you to see American cuisine.
To see America.
To see America and to see America cooking, right?
Exactly. And American cooking was really coming to the forefront, but regional American food in the mid-'70s was having not only a rebirth, but there was attention focused on regional food all over America. And from New Orleans to the Northwest to the Northeast, Southern food, real Southern cooking, the Southwest, and really, it's because of the bicentennial in 1976 that the things that are American were really, the limelight was on them. And it was the beginning of the day for Americans to be the chefs running hotels and restaurants all over the country.
So 14 months, you come back, and what happens? You said, enough for the acting? What happened?
No, actually, I came back to be a theater professional. And I worked as a technician, a theater technician. I worked as a technician at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. I worked at Brooklyn College. I was a stage manager.
Director? Wait, come on. Let's
Stage
talk about
manager.
the stage direction for the Yiddish theater. I mean, how many people could a good Roman Catholic kid explain the open Yiddish?
Well, let me explain. You see, through Brooklyn College, I met Ben Bonus. And Ben Bonus was really one of the great, not only Yiddish theater actors, but he was an actor-manager. And the idea of the actor-manager goes back centuries. Really, for an actor to run his own company, that's what an actor-manager is, and that's what Ben was doing. And I met Ben Bonus, and I became his stage manager for about 1.5 years, and I did shows with him in New York and New York City, when he would set up shop and do great Yiddish theater shows in Yiddish. So I had to learn all the dialogue and really be able to pick up all the cues in Yiddish and almost call the show in Yiddish to really make it work. So it was a great thing. But as an actor, my best day jobs were working really as a technician, was working as a stage manager, a lighting person.
And then you get a job, you become, this is exactly, the world of working in New York. You become a yellow cab driver, right?
Yeah, and and also really at this time, I got married to my high school sweetheart Diane, and cooking,
you started cooking.
My hobby. A lot of actors.
Red sauce.
Red sauce. Vincent Price, great actor Vincent Price, was a hobby cook and wrote 2 cookbooks. We used to see him on the Johnny Carson show doing cooking, and it was, so really for an out-of-work actor, cooking is a great thing, especially when you can't afford to eat in restaurants. Get a book, learn some recipes, and cook it at home. So it was really a great hobby.
So you started in the yellow cab, and then the interesting situation is you elevate yourself to the black cab.
Well, the yellow cab is another way of life, and driving a black car,
Black car,
a livery,
livery car, where they'd have your picture now in the back, Lomonaco,
right? It's
okay?
right.
Or Michael,
That's okay.
okay?
No autographs.
Okay, no autographs. So what?
I'll be here all week. Try the veal.
So one day you pick up this legendary chef, Patrick.
Yeah. The call goes out in the cars that the chef from the Odeon wants to go home. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I got it. I said, I got it. I drove, like a banshee to get to that call and pick it up because I wanted to meet him. Because all I really did in my off hours, besides go to auditions and study, I studied as an actor. I studied at HB Studios. Julie Bavasso was my acting coach. I studied with Julie for 3 years. She was very famous character actor. Was read about food, chefs, and the day of the modern American chef was really upon us in 1982.
So you pick him up at 1 o'clock. This is Patrick Cook.
Patrick Clark, who was really one of our first great American chefs. He was in that
and
first
he was also
generation.
an African-American chef.
And, he really made himself. He went to New York City Technical College. He went to France for 3 years. He studied, and he came back, and he was a great French chef. And at the Odeon that was his restaurant. He was getting great reviews at the Odeon. I picked him up, and the whole 40-minute ride home back to Brooklyn, where I took him home that night. I took him to his home. While I was driving him, all I wanted to know was, how do you become a chef? How do you do that?
So Patrick was instrumental because he went to New York City Tech, that you went to New York City Tech.
He was very generous. He talked about himself and cooking. I mean, he was exhausted. It was the end of the night. And he did steer me in the direction that New York City Technical College, New York City Tech, had a food and hospitality, a restaurant and hospitality program. And, I looked into it. I had friends who were chefs who also taught up at the Culinary Institute. But I looked into it. It was in Brooklyn. It was home. And
you had some credits from Brooklyn College.
I had City University credits for Brooklyn College, so I could transfer in. I was there 6 months later.
So when did you start at the New York City Tech?
In 1983, and really, I worked my way as an actor to an equity card. I worked my way to a SAG card, a Screen Actors Guild card, and I really put it aside for the creative aspect of being a chef. I knew it was a business, and I knew I'd have to learn it, and that's why I went to school.
So you graduated, and what happens? Where's your first job?
Well, really, my first job
was when you were still in school, right? At Monty's.
Well, I needed to work.
At the famed Monty's Venetian Room.
Well, Monty's Venetian, Nick Monty was an unbelievable character. Nick, at Monty's Venetian Room in Brooklyn, was this very embracing host. He ran a great restaurant. It was serious, old school red sauce Italian food. And I worked there nights while I went to school. While I went to City Tech to be a chef, I went into school in the day. I worked at nights, and that's a tough thing. Always to go to school full time and work full time, but it was worth doing because I really learned. I learned my bones there because I was really working. I started I started really almost washing pots. I was doing a little dishwashing, and I was peeling shrimp and cleaning fish and cutting vegetables, and I worked my way through the veg station, the broiler station, the saute station.
After graduating, how long did you stay there?
Well, when I graduated school, the chef I was working for had a great background, Frank Caputo. I'll never forget Frank because he went to Cornell. He really learned the hospitality and hotel industry. And I worked there for a year and a half. And when I graduated, I went to work for J.P. Morgan for 3 months in a training program. And then I went to Club 101. Club 101 is a private club.
And this was also the time before the change of the tax law. And the Club 101 was when Peter Calico opened up 101 Park Avenue.
A beautiful building.
Fantastic
41st
building,
Street and Park Avenue.
41st. It was an old building, and he took over the roots and the situation. And I remember being a young kid because I'm younger than you now. I'm lying a little bit, but that I went to this 101 Club. It was fantastic. It was beautiful, and the quality of food, as you were saying, they had Swiss chefs. They had
the mid '80s in the restaurant scene in New York was a crazy time. The economy was in its crazy days. People were drinking, copious amounts of champagne in restaurants. But I went to Club 101. It was a bridge. It was a great job to learn. I had great, the chefs were all from Switzerland. They were highly trained Swiss, European chefs. I met one of my best friends there, who we're best friends today. He was my boss, my sous chef, Matt Stein, who's out in California, runs a big restaurant company. But I went there, it was great training, and I say it was a bridge job because I still had to make this transition to being, working nights. Even though in the theater I worked nights, it was that transitional period. But the Club 101
it was day.
It was a day job, and it was really doing
and then some parties where you were able to learn
work.
Catering.
It was a very intricate and detailed work that I learned. It was actually kind of very old school, like a bridge to Escoffier. But from there, I knew to make a commitment, I needed a top New York restaurant. I needed to work at some place like Le Cirque.
And that you got to because you had a friend, right?
Well, the friend was a maitre d'. Yep. Renato Palmieri was the maitre d'. And actually, Cirio Macchioni was, through marriage, Renato's nephew, really. Renato's.
And finally, he gives you a resume, right?
Gave a resume, and 3 months later, Alain Sayak called me. So, from there, I was on my own, as they say.
And this is when Le Cirque was in the hotel.
Le Cirque on 64th.
Right, on 64th Street, before the other.
It was called the Mayfair.
The Mayfair Hotel.
And Le Cirque was, I think, the trendiest, most important restaurant of its day. It really set the tone for what a trendy, important restaurant is in New York. It's still, for me, it's not only for nostalgic reasons, but I still think that Le Cirque is one of the most important restaurants in New York because it has one of the greatest restaurateurs of our day, Cirio Macchioni, and his family, his sons. Not only do they run a great business, but their style of hospitality, their style of food and cooking and wine and service is very, very important. It's a world of fine dining that maybe the world is changing, as I've heard from other people. The world is constantly changing, but there are lessons to be learned, and they change with the times.
But it was a great apprenticeship and a great training ground.
That's really what it was.
And then you get to the famed 21 Club.
I worked at Le Cirque for Alain Sayak, and I worked for Daniel Ballou. And I worked for two great chefs who, Alain left, Danielle came in. I worked for two great chefs who mentored me at one of the great restaurants that New York has ever seen. And so many of New York's top chefs, and actually nationally prominent chefs, came out of Le Cirque in the late 80s, that period of time, the early 90s. So it was really a very, very special opportunity. But I did go to 21 in 1987. Now I'm only out of school for 4 years, and I actually at that point for 3 years. I graduated in 1984.
But everybody remembered 21. Originally a speakeasy, 21 had a great reputation, and people would know the famed 21 hamburger and
right.
all that.
21 was not only famous, it still is world renowned as this really important part of New York life. The business community, the writing community, the actor community, the entertainment aspect,
and the people you met later on in life. We'll get to him later on. So you were how long were you at the 21 Club?
Well, I went to 21 as a sous chef in the reopening because really, as you know, the business world, Marshall Kogan bought 21, and it became it transitioned from Jerry Burns and Pete Krindler, or Kreindler as some people say, from Kreindler and Burns to a new ownership. But Marshall Kogan's ownership of 21 was very personal. He was a resident owner. He was there. It was important to him, and he refurbished it. And that was really in 1987 where I went there. It was really in its refurbished day. It was the reopening. It was a very special thing to reopen a landmark restaurant. And it was a great experience as a sous chef working for Alain Sayak. I really got to step up my game because it was a very, very fussy clientele, very specific. They'd been there for years and years and attracting new clientele.
Spent like 7 years there?
I worked for a year and a half. I moved on with Jeffrey Zakarian, who's a great chef. We went to work for Warner Leroy.
Right, at the tavern.
Actually, we went to
Maxwell's.
Maxwell's, thank you.
That's right.
Maxwell's Plum, which was in its day a great New York restaurant. And we did that for a while. I went back to 21 in 1989. I was appointed in 1989 to be the executive chef. And I stayed until nearly the end of 1996.
Now, during that time, you decide, hey, I have a Screen Actors Guild, I'm SAG, I'm this. I might as well write a cookbook, right?
Well, we did the 21 cookbook in 1994. And it was an early restaurant cookbook. I mean, in terms of the genre, there weren't that many. But it was really, I wrote it with love. We did a lot of research on the history of the restaurant, the history of the recipes.
But interesting, in the early 90s, you get the opportunity to meet the legendary Julia Childs.
21 opened many, many doors for me. And I have a very fond spot in my heart for 21, for Uncle Jerry Burns, Pete Crindler. They were mentors in a way. Julia Child I was introduced to Julia Child. She invited me very graciously to be on her program, Cooking with Master Chefs. And I went up to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was on Julia's show. We taped a program, a segment that day in her home, which is where they set up the studio for Master Chef series, which ran on PBS. Still pops up every now and then. And it became the beginning of a relationship, a friendship with Julia that lasted.
But it also gave you an interesting opening because there was a new TV network coming out. Like the days, like ESPN was a new TV network, like the Food Network. And then the kid from Brooklyn gets Michael's Place.
Well, I was invited to the Food Network to do some programs, and those were the early days of Food Network. In fact, in the early days, they weren't even on in the New York area. They were on other cable networks, but they were not yet on in New York. But I joined the Food Network in 1996. It was really at the same time I left 21, actually to go open my own restaurant. I went out to try to do my own business. Restaurant chef, entrepreneur is a tough mix. And at the same time that I was doing that, I had written one cookbook at 21, and I joined the Food Network, and we began a program in 1997 called Michael's Place, which ran for about 140 episodes.
You also get an opportunity to work at the famous, the restaurant of New York, or maybe of the world, the Windows of the World.
Yeah, Windows on the World in 1997, David Emile and Joe Baum invited me to join them. They had reopened Windows in 1996. Joe had originated Windows in 1976. And I joined them in 1997. And I had 4 years there. It was just an unbelievable experience. We had international clientele. We were the largest grossing restaurant in terms of sales. But we also had an unbelievable staff.
And then you opened up Wild Blue over there, and
Yep.
there were other situations.
Well, Wild Blue is a very creative experience for me because we took something that was called Cellar in the Sky, which had a great run, and with David Emile and Joe Baum, we turned Cellar in the Sky into Wild Blue, which was a grill chop house, not too far off from the kind of food that I'm cooking now at Porterhouse, New York. A chop house, a grill, a steak restaurant. This is really informal American dining at its best, I think.
We're not going to harp much, but I have to talk a little bit about 9/11 quickly. On 9/11, you had an 11 o'clock appointment to have your eyeglasses checked, and you walk into the lens crafter at 8:15 in the morning, and what happens at 8:45?
Well, I know by now it's kind of a very well-known story, but the point is that morning when I got to work at 8:15, I tried to save time in my day and try to get an errand out of the way. I had to get my reading glasses fixed, and I went into a lens crafter that was in the shopping level, the concourse level, in the concourse below the Twin Towers. And I was sitting there with the with the doctor, finishing up my eyeglass prescription when the first plane hit the North Tower, hit Tower 1, which is where Windows was located. So that errand saved my life. It was just
And you've given back on that with the relief fund and the Windows program.
well, with David Emile, with Waldy Malouf, with Tom Valenti, with other chefs and restaurateurs really from around the nation, we built a Windows of Hope Family Relief Fund. We were able to create something that was able to help the food service workers who were lost on that day, their survivors, their families.
Then you get involved with Noche, with David.
I did a lot of consulting while I continued, because I went on to the Travel Channel
Right, now you went
to
to
do a show
travel,
called Epicurious, which I
Epicurious.
did for 8 years. And so I did a lot of television.
And then it's
over the-
2006, and it's interesting because one of the people that you met when you were at 21 was
Ken Himmel.
Ken Himmel from Related.
Well, now he is the president of Related Urban Development, and they built the Time Warner Center. And Ken Himmel invited me in 2006 to look at this space, which is at the Time Warner Center on the 4th floor.
a restaurant on the 4th floor. Who could ever believe a restaurant would make it?
But with a view of Central Park and 250 seats, and I wrote a business plan, and he and I agreed, and his team agreed, that it was a good plan for a steakhouse, but a modern American steakhouse. What is that? Well, we sell prime beef, great prime beef, but we also do other things. You know, seafood, lobsters, all fresh vegetables, and the beef is all natural, hormone-free. So we have a great menu mix, and this is really American dining at its best, which takes me right back to 1977 when I was on the road, 1975
So now
when I
you're
was on
able
the road.
to,
Make gumbo and really kind of do the things and the foods that I love to do.
31 years married to?
Diane Lomonaco, we married 31 years. Actually, we went to high school together, so it's a little longer than that. But married 31 years, you know, we love New York. This is our hometown.
Quickly, you even did a second cookbook, right?
Second cookbook, nightly specials. In 2004, nightly specials came out. This is home cooking. And I took a break from TV and from restaurants to write this book to enable people, to teach them, to kind of be creative, tap into their own creative
Now, do you
juices.
think somebody like me could cook?
Anybody can cook.
Anyone?
If I can cook, you can cook. But cooking is great relaxation. And we've more focused on food today than in any time ever. The last 10 years has been this growth in love for food in America.
So, you know, the Lomonacos, the Sicilian family, has one brother who's the psychiatrist, one brother who's the radiologist, and the other brother who's just really a mensch and a wonderful human being. And thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Major support for these broadcasts is provided by Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by AVR Realty Company, LLC, All Nation Renovation, Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, Cassidy Turley, C.B. Richard Ellis, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Eastern Consolidated, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns and Gian Tomasi, Goldman Properties, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Corman Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Newmark Knight Frank, RAL Development Services, the Spandrel Group, LLC, Site Comply, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Triangle Equities, the Wyckoff Group, Urban American. Bye.